She didn't beg for money, she begged for milk. A baby in her arms, tears in her eyes. But instead of helping, people stared. Then one rich man stepped forward, and what he said, no one was ready for it. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. Please, just milk. Those were the words that silenced the noise in the convenience store. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon, one of those dull, gray days where time felt slower. Inside a small corner store on 3rd and Main, life moved along like clockwork. The cashier was chatting with a delivery guy about the latest football game. A man in a suit was on his phone, impatiently tapping his card against the chip reader. Two teenagers near the snack aisle debated over chips versus candy bars. Then, the door creaked open. Heads turned slightly at the sound, but no one paid it much attention until they saw her. A little black girl, no older than 10, stood at the entrance. Rainwater dripped from her tangled hair, soaking the tattered clothes that clung to her thin body. Her bare feet left tiny wet footprints on the tile floor. Her arms trembled, not just from the cold, but from the weight of the tiny baby she was holding close to her chest, wrapped in what looked like an old dish towel with holes. She said nothing at first. Her eyes didn't meet anyone's. She just slowly walked past the checkout counter, straight toward the dairy section. The air suddenly felt heavier, the buzz of fluorescent lights above humming louder than before. The man in the suit looked up. The cashier frowned, watching her closely. She reached the fridge door and paused. Her fingers hesitated before grasping. A small carton of milk. Not a gallon, not a brand name. Just enough for maybe a bottle or two. She clutched it to her chest like it was gold. Then, she stepped forward, approaching the counter. That's when everyone heard her voice for the first time. "Can I please get some milk for my baby?" She whispered. "I don't have money, but I'll pay you back." It wasn't just what she said, it was how she said it. Desperation, fear, hope. The store went still. Even the humming fridge seemed to go quiet. The cashier, a middle-aged man with a blue vest and a receding hairline, didn't speak at first. He blinked, as if trying to process what he'd just heard. Then his eyes narrowed. "You think this is a shelter?" he snapped. "No money, no milk. Put it back." The girl's lips quivered. She hugged the carton tighter. The baby in her arms stirred and let out a soft cry. Behind her, someone cleared his throat. A man, maybe in his 50s, stepped out of line. He wore a long black trench coat and held a briefcase. Everything about him screamed wealth. Clean shoes, expensive watch, calm posture. The kind of man who usually kept to himself in places like this. That he walked slowly toward the counter. "I'll pay for it," he said firmly. The cashier scoffed. "You don't even know her." The man ignored him. He pulled out his wallet and placed a crisp $100 bill on the counter. "And I'll take care of whatever else she needs too." Now all eyes were on him. The girl looked up at the man, unsure of whether to trust him. Her lips parted like she wanted to speak, but she couldn't find the words. He knelt down slowly so they were eye level. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Amari," she whispered. "Hi, Amari. I'm Marcus. Is that your little brother?" She nodded slowly. "His name is Jaden. He's only 3 months. Where's your mom or dad?" Her eyes dropped. "Mom went away. Dad? I don't know. It's just us now." A beat of silence. Marcus reached out and gently placed his hand over hers. "You're very brave, Amari. You did the right thing. Coming here." The cashier rolled his eyes. "Look, are you buying the milk, or—" Marcus turned toward him sharply. "Bag the milk. And add diapers, formula, and whatever else she needs." "But," I said, "bag it." The man's voice had changed. Firm. Final. The kind of voice that didn't argue. The cashier reluctantly followed orders. Soon, a bag filled with essentials was handed to Amari. She clutched it with one hand while holding baby Jaden with the other. Marcus stood and looked around the store. "Any of you want to help? Or are we just going to go back to our chips and phones?" A few people stepped forward. One woman handed over a $20 bill. A young man offered baby wipes. Another asked if Amari had somewhere to stay. For the first time that day, the little girl smiled. It was faint, but real. As they walked out into the rain, Marcus holding an umbrella over her head. The store returned to life, but not the same life as before, because that day, on a rainy Tuesday, the world stopped for a moment and remembered what kindness looked like. The cashier, A man in his 40s with a blue store uniform and an attitude hardened by years of routine slammed his hand on the counter. "Get out," he shouted, voice sharp enough to pierce through the low hum of the store. "You kids always try to steal." He jabbed a finger toward the door like it was a weapon. "She said she has no money. What does that tell you?" He barked. A quiet hush fell over the shop. Candy wrappers crinkled. Shopping. Bags paused midair. Customers turned their heads. Some frowned. Others leaned closer, whispering quietly behind the shelves. But no one moved. The little girl, no taller than the counter itself, stood still, her soaked clothes sticking to her tiny frame. In her arms, the baby let out a soft cry, a desperate little sound that seemed to echo louder than the cashier's voice. The girl didn't speak. She didn't plead. She just held her baby tighter, her small arms wrapped around him like a shield. Her knees looked like they might buckle under the weight of fear and fatigue. Slowly, she stepped back, her eyes darting around the store, searching for an exit, for a way out, maybe even for someone to help. But her eyes were filled with quiet panic. The baby whimpered again, louder this time. Hungry, cold, and that's when the door swung open. A gust of cold air followed the man who entered. He wore a tailored gray suit, perfectly pressed slacks, polished shoes that didn't have a single speck of dirt. On his wrist was a sleek gold watch, and in his hand, the latest smartphone. He was the picture of wealth, refined, confident, untouchable. He paused just inside the doorway, frowning as he took in the scene. "What's going on here?" he asked, lowering his phone. The cashier folded his arms. "Another street kid trying to scam people," he replied, his voice laced with judgment. "Walked in with no shoes, no money, asking for free milk." Always the same sob story. The girl lowered her head, shrinking beneath the weight of his words. She didn't speak. She didn't defend herself. She just prepared to be kicked out, like it had happened before. Like she expected it to happen again. The man in the suit looked at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he stepped forward. "What's your name?" he asked gently. The girl didn't answer right away. She looked up, hesitant, unsure if she was about to be helped or humiliated. "Amaya," she finally whispered. "And this is my brother, Caleb." The man crouched down so he was eye level with her. His voice softened. "Hi, Amaya. How old is Caleb?" 3 months, she said, her voice almost cracking. "He hasn't had anything since yesterday. I just needed some milk." Behind them, the cashier scoffed. "You see? Exactly. These kids know how to put on a show." The man turned slowly to the cashier, his expression now serious. "Is this how you treat a hungry child?" he asked. The cashier shrugged. "It's not a charity, sir. Rules are rules." The suited man stood up straight, reached into his pocket, and pulled out a black leather wallet. Without hesitation, he placed a crisp $100 bill on the counter. "She's not asking for charity. She's asking for basic human decency. Add diapers, baby food, formula, whatever she needs. And keep the change." The cashier opened his mouth to argue, but the look in the man's eyes shut him down immediately. More than just money, this man had presence, the kind that couldn't be ignored. One by one, other customers began to step forward. A young woman in a hoodie added a small pack of wipes. A middle-aged man placed a baby bottle beside the register. Even the delivery driver quietly slid over a soft baby blanket he had in the back of his truck. The cashier, now red-faced and rattled, bagged the items silently. The man in the suit gently placed the bag into Amaya's free hand. "You're incredibly brave," he said softly. "But you shouldn't have to be. Not at your age." Amaya clutched the baby in the bag, her lower lip trembling. "Thank you," she whispered. The man smiled. "You don't have to thank me. Just promise me one thing." She nodded. "Someday, when you're in a position to help someone else, you do it. Even if it's just with a carton of milk." Outside, the rain had lightened into a soft drizzle as the store door shut behind her. Amaya didn't feel quite as alone, and inside, the crowd stood still, some ashamed, some inspired. But no one forgot the girl who asked for milk, and the stranger who reminded them all what it meant to be human. But instead of ignoring her, the man in the suit knelt down. He didn't hesitate. He didn't look around for approval. He simply dropped to one knee, lowering himself to the eye level of the trembling little girl clutching a baby in her thin arms. The girl flinched slightly, unsure of what he would say or do. Her eyes, wide and tired, reflected both fear and hope, like someone who wanted to believe the world could be kind, but had been disappointed too many times before. The man's voice was calm, gentle, unlike anything she'd heard that day. "Is your baby hungry?" he asked softly. The girl nodded, barely able to speak. He hasn't eaten since yesterday." The baby stirred again, fussing quietly, his face buried in the torn towel that served as a blanket. Without another word, the man stood up. He didn't lecture. He didn't question her story. He just walked over to the baby aisle, grabbed 2 cartons of formula, a warm bottle of milk from the front cooler, and a few jars of baby food. Then he returned to the counter and placed the items down, one by one. The cashier rolled his eyes and muttered under his breath, "She won't pay you back, you know." The man didn't even look at him. Calm and composed, he reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a sleek black credit card, and placed it on the counter. "I'm not asking her to," he said. There was no anger in his voice, just certainty. Then, in a gesture that made everyone watching pause, he took off his long gray coat, walked back to the girl, and gently wrapped it around her shoulders. The fabric swallowed her small frame, warm and soft against her cold, damp skin. He knelt again and asked, "What's your name?" The girl hesitated. No one had asked her that in days. "Amira," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The man smiled. "Amira," he repeated, like he wanted to make sure she heard it kindly. "You're not alone anymore." And in that moment, the entire store went silent. Even the soft hum of the refrigerators seemed to fade. Customers who had previously just watched now stood frozen, caught between guilt and awe. A teenage boy near the gum rack put his phone away. An older woman wiped a tear from the corner of her eye. The same cashier who had shouted just moments earlier now avoided eye contact, pretending to busy himself with receipts. The man stood up once more and turned toward the rest of the store. "She didn't come here to steal," he said firmly. "She came to survive. There's a difference." No one disagreed. He turned back to Amira, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "Do you have somewhere to go?" She shook her head slowly. "All right," he nodded. "Then you'll come with me for now. We'll figure it out. You and your little brother." Amira's eyes filled with tears, not from fear, but from something she hadn't felt in a long time. Safety. She looked down at the baby in her arms, now asleep. Face relaxed for the first time all day. As the man led her toward the exit, several customers quietly walked to the counter and began paying it forward. One offered cash to cover anything else Amira might need. Another grabbed an extra blanket from her car and handed it over. A quiet ripple of kindness swept through the store. Like a forgotten instinct waking up, the rain had softened outside, now falling in a gentle drizzle. The man held the door open for Amira as they stepped into the gray afternoon light. Wrapped in his coat, holding her brother, and carrying the bag of food, Amira paused and looked back. Not a single person in the store looked away, and in that second, the story of a forgotten child turned into something else entirely. A moment of human decency, a spark of compassion, a reminder that sometimes a single act of kindness can change everything. As they sat on a bench just outside the corner store, the rain finally gave way to a soft drizzle. The air was still cold, and the city moved around them. Cars passing, people walking, life continuing as usual. But for a small girl named Amira, this was the first moment of peace she'd felt in days. She cradled her baby brother in her lap, gently feeding him the warm bottle of milk the kind man had just bought. Her small hands trembled with exhaustion and lingering fear, but she focused all her energy on making sure the baby drank. He suckled slowly, his eyes fluttering closed, soothed by the warmth. Beside her on the bench, the man in the gray suit sat quietly. He didn't rush her. He didn't ask unnecessary questions. He simply waited, his coat still wrapped around her shoulders. Then, in a voice low and gentle, he finally asked, "Where are your parents?" Amira kept her eyes on the baby, her voice almost a whisper. "My mom died last year," she said. "It was pneumonia. We couldn't afford medicine." She paused, swallowing hard. "My dad, he left after. I don't know where he is. Some nights I think he might come back." But she stopped. She didn't need to finish. "I live under the bridge, near the old gas station," she continued softly. "It's just me and Caleb. I just want to keep him alive." The man didn't speak right away. He looked at her, this brave little girl, who had endured more than most adults. And for a moment, he felt his throat tighten. Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out his phone. "Yeah," he said, after a brief pause. "It's me. I need emergency placement for 2 minors. One is an infant. Tonight. Somewhere warm, safe." Amira looked up, confused. Her lips parted like she wanted to ask a question, but couldn't find the words. The man smiled at her gently. "You don't belong in the rain, Amira," he said. "You don't belong begging for milk. You deserve a bed, a future, an education." The baby let out a soft sigh. Now asleep in her arms, that be why now. A small crowd had gathered near the store entrance. Word had spread. People who had witnessed the earlier confrontation trickled outside to see what happened next. Some recorded quietly with their phones. A few whispered to each other. One elderly woman stood with her hands clasped together, wiping away a tear with the edge of her scarf. Nobody expected this rich stranger to do more than just pay for a bottle of milk. But he didn't stop there. Over the next hour, he made call after call. To a local shelter he had helped fund years ago. To a children's nonprofit he'd once volunteered with. To a doctor friend who offered to examine baby Caleb that same night. He arranged a private car to pick them up. A staff member from the shelter came within 45 minutes, armed with warm blankets, fresh clothes, baby supplies, and a promise that they would be safe. "Do I have to pay for this?" Amira asked quietly. Unsure, the man knelt again and said, "No, sweetheart. You've already paid enough just by surviving." He reached into his wallet and pulled out a small card. "If you ever need anything, school help, advice, or just someone to talk to, you call this number, okay?" Amira nodded, her eyes welling up. Not with fear this time, but with something else. Something new. Hope. The crowd outside didn't cheer. They didn't clap. But the atmosphere had shifted. There was reverence in the silence. People who had done nothing when she first walked and now stood in awe, reminded of something they had forgotten. Kindness. The car arrived. Amira stood slowly, the baby still asleep in her arms. Before stepping inside, she turned back to the man. "Thank you," she whispered. He smiled, putting a hand over his heart. "You're going to do great things, Amira. I believe in you." And then, just like that, she was gone. Off to a warm place, a safe bed, a new beginning. The man remained on the bench for a few moments, watching the car disappear down the street. He never looked back toward the store or at the people still recording, because for him, the story wasn't about going viral. It was about doing what was right when it mattered most. And that day, on a rainy city sidewalk, a stranger didn't just buy a bottle of milk. He changed 2 lives, forever. Weeks later, everything had changed for Amira and her baby brother. Gone were the cold, sleepless nights beneath a crumbling bridge. Gone was the fear of not knowing where their next meal would come from. Instead, Amira found herself waking up in a soft bed, with clean sheets, warm meals, and the gentle hum of safety in the air. They were now living at a local children's center, brightly painted walls, soft lullabies at night, and a team of caretakers who knew their names, their needs, their pain. For the first time in a long time, Amira didn't have to survive alone. She was back in school. The staff had enrolled her in the 5th grade. Her favorite subject? Science. She loved learning how the stars worked, how seeds grew, how electricity flowed. Because now, she believed she could grow 2 for her baby brother Caleb. He was thriving. His cheeks filled out, his giggles came often, and his tiny fingers gripped tighter each day. Doctors said he was gaining weight at a healthy pace. And most days, he wore a smile that lit up the whole room. The man who changed their lives? His name was Mr. Bennett, a quiet millionaire, a man who never chased attention, who never posted selfies with good deeds, who never boasted about donations or accomplishments. In fact, many people in the city barely knew his name until that video surfaced that a local news crew, tipped off by someone who had witnessed the entire store scene, tracked him down. They wanted to know why. Why did he stop for a little girl in the rain that day, when so many others turned away? Standing outside the children's center, wearing his signature gray coat, Mr. Bennett offered only a short, honest reply. Because kindness isn't a donation. It's a responsibility. If we ignore children asking for milk, what kind of world are we building? That simple sentence was recorded, and within hours, it went viral. The video exploded across social media. Millions watched it. Tears were shed. Comments poured in. People around the world were shaken, not just by the tragedy, but by the tenderness, the courage of a child, the compassion of a stranger. Thousands donated to the shelter that housed Amira and Caleb. Volunteers showed up to help. Families offered books, toys, even letters of encouragement. One woman in London wrote, "I watched this with my daughter. We both cried. And now, we're packing care kits for children in need near us." Another viewer from Canada commented, "I've walked past kids like Amira before. I won't ever do that again." What started as a desperate whisper for milk in a convenience store became a spark that lit up the world. It reminded people that there are Amiras in every city. Children quietly begging not for toys or fame or fortune, but for basic survival, for dignity, for help. And it reminded us that we don't need to be millionaires to change a life. Sometimes all it takes is a warm coat, a listening ear, or a few kind words at the right moment. Mr. Bennett never sought the spotlight again. After the media storm calmed, he returned to his quiet life. But Amira would later say that he visits once a week, bringing books, sometimes helping with homework, always checking in. She now wants to be a social worker when she grows up. "I want to be someone's Mr. Bennett," she says with a proud smile. So if this story moved you, don't scroll past, like, share, and subscribe for more real-life stories that shine a light on the good that still exists in the world. Because somewhere out there, another child like Amira is still waiting, still hoping someone will see them, still believing in miracles, and maybe that someone is you, because one moment of kindness can change everything. Thanks for watching. Blue Heart.